Hello, welcome to Geekatplay Studio Tutorials. A lot of people asked us how we accomplished our animation in Circadian Cannon, where we combined several animations from different software into one. Someone called this layered animation, and I think that's a good name for it. You've also asked how you can add live action into your VU animation. The solution to both of these questions is really the same, and we're going to show you how in this tutorial. So let's first show you what we're talking about. This is Circadian Cannon, and we have this animation, and you see that he's flying, and from the apparent camera view he's flying in front of and behind some trees while the camera is following alongside. And also, if you notice right here, the smoke and flame from his gun, this was added after, and this was Particle Illusions, a different software. And for live action, let's show you an example of some live action that we did a while ago. And this one was actually done in VU 5. With VU 6 you can do even more with this. There's more flexibility and power to combine animations. We filmed this actress here on the green screen as a concept test for a music video we did. Right here you see again we're running through the trees, between trees, live action this time, and when she walks out you can see she is coming out from between the trees. In the end, this portion where we zoom out is actually an alpha plane that is embedded into the scenery. Now we're going to look at how you can do this. So right here, pretend we have a shot of the ground or the trees at the bottom. Normally you can bring trees right up close to the camera so they're going in front, but I'll also show you another way that you can film and you can actually see the feet on the ground as well. So as usually we start with our terrain, and let's make this terrain here a little bit bigger. And we'll just fiddle with the size here to get it exactly how we want. And now with this terrain, let's right click edit. We're not going to do anything fancy. All that we're just doing is having some very slight slopes here and a little bit of texture. Just something to go above the ground here. So let's Control C, Control V the terrain. So we duplicate the terrain so that there's two terrains, and also we don't need the ground, so let's delete it. We don't need it because when we render it will be in the way between two layers, covering up some things we'll want to see. And also we can create a new layer, take our terrain and move it into the new layer. And our original first terrain, let's change materials and let's change it to something here. Like that. And let's do it to the other terrain so we can have the same terrain on both of them. And one of the things you can do manually, you can insert trees, and we'll show you how to do that, but also another way you can do this is by using the ecosystem. It does help sometimes, but then again the ecosystem populates everything and maybe we don't want that. What we need to do is use echo brushes within the ecosystem. So we click on this, I select add, and let's add rock. And as soon as we add the first item, our paint button is enabled. So now let's add a plant. And let's add maybe a middle-sized palm, and let's add something else lower on the ground to make it a little more realistic. Maybe this one here. And now we can zoom in a little closer. You remember that one square is 10 meters by 10 meters. And so now we can just start painting. And here, we'll just add them along here. Pop, pop, pop. Just all along the edge right here. You see how this gives you some randomness, but you're in control of where approximately that is placed. And let's move the camera a little bit below. Okay, and so when we preview, this is what we'll have. This is just the start of the trees. And if we move it along, we can see the scenery change. A couple things. One trick that you can do, you can not show the bottom, but bring the camera a lot closer so that they're running right up in front of you. So we'll move the camera like this. So we have like an eye level view of the person we're following. And you can just place the trees if you want without the ecosystem, but the ecosystem may provide that interesting result with the randomizing. And this is just an example. Let's go to our second train here. We'll go to our ecosystem. We'll add rock. We'll add plant. Now we'll add probably very similar things to what we had before. And let's go to the trees and palm. And let's click on our paint tool. And what do we have? People will run probably right around this area. Okay. And we'll increase the brush radius so we can cover this easier. And just right here, let's paint a little bit more. And also we need to zoom out a little bit. We need to add a little bit more in the background. Some other stuff going on. Okay, let's go ahead and click on preview. And here we have our jungle that we've created. It's multi-layer and looks kind of interesting. And again, we've separated them into two layers. So if we take this layer and say hide from render, what we have is this. It's more useful though to cut off the back of this first terrain. And let's hide this one as well so we're not mixing it around. To do this, you just take a cube, stretch this all the way to cover this terrain, and we'll bring this here as close as you can to the trees. And now we'll just select the terrain first and then select the cube and use our Boolean operation so we remove that portion of the terrain. So what we've done is we've actually cut off right here, and you can see this strip here. You say, okay, maybe you want to come closer to that tree line. You just click on the cube, move it closer to that line. But if you look there, you see we have a bit of a strip there. So we'll need to extend our cube so it colors covers everything for the Boolean operation. And so this is our front step here. You can use the terrain like this, or you can do it in another way. The terrain is a little bit nice, but you can play with it a little bit more, and it's easier to adjust. At this point, we can start to actually render. So let's take our camera and we'll click on this animation. The animation will pop up and we'll just close it. You can use it if you want. You can set your camera, but I'll disable it for now. And let's add the keyframe, and let's move it to 5 seconds. Normally what you do, your speed is calculated by your distance and time. We'll assume that we have a very fast runner here. So we'll move it a little bit. Yeah, right here. So we have our camera preset animation. If you want, we can add some shake to the camera to make it more real, but for now we'll just leave it. So now that is all done, we need to go and click on render. One thing, if you right click on the render, you have options here such as distance blurring. Many people say you have something like flickering, so this will help with distance blurring to remove that flickering. Also, these square pixels, these are your standard, but for widescreens the NTSC pixel ratio is going to be 0.9 or 1.2 or something else. It depends on the format you're rendering for. Most programs read only square pixels. Normally I use NTSC 0.9 when I render for the widescreen, but you can do whatever you like. And we'll just have square pixels for now, and when we click on render, there's a couple of things. When you select broadcast quality, you'll have motion blur. Final will give you the same thing without the motion blur. It depends on your preferences, because when an object is moving really fast, you can add the motion blur inside the post-production, or you can do it before. Sometimes I like to do it without motion blur, even on the higher quality. It gives you a sharper look with the alpha map. And also, when you start saving, you can save it as a set of images, PNG, which will embed the alpha map there, which is very nice. But for now, we're just going to save this as an AVI. Run 1, and we also need to save the alpha mat, and we'll do this one as run 1 underscore a dot AVI. 24 frames is what we usually render for the film, but personally I prefer 24 frames. Some people like 30 or maybe even 60 frames, but for this tutorial we'll drop it down to 15 frames for a faster rendering. Also, the same with the frame resolution. You can go higher or whatever you need it to be. And if you have questions about frame resolution, you can go online. You can go to, for example, Wikipedia, and right there it tells you all the frame rates, what they're using, what size, and everything. So it's a pretty helpful reference here. But for this tutorial, for now, we'll just use 320 by 240 square pixels, 15 frames, and we'll render on final with 2 layers. So just to recap, we're rendering this first layer, this strip that we cut out. So let's render our animation now. Okay, here we've finished rendering our first layer. So let's preview and see what we have. Okay. This is just the front trees, and we also recorded alpha. That's what that looks like. And that will help us to remove the background with this one. Okay, let's go right now and let's say hide this from render. Also, if you feel more comfortable, you can create another layer and hide this first terrain so you don't see it as you're preparing the other terrain for animation. Now go to this one and enable that second layer to render. And let's go ahead and render it. We'll name this run 2. And we don't actually need the alpha channel for this because that is our background. You can actually make multiple layers for this if you want, but I found that 2 is the most efficient and useful many times. So let's start this render now. Okay, and here we have our backdrop, our background rendered. So now we're going to bring in Adobe After Effects. And you can use any other application, one that you prefer to work with, but we'll look at how we can do it in After Effects for now. You can see that I've already imported our animations. And plus I've also created a simple PNG with transparency. This one is a flying saucer, but you can use any other kind of footage, the live footage included. So let's go and take one and just drop and drag. So we'll create our composition. We'll have one, we'll have the second, and the third one. And let's enable full, so we have full resolution. One thing right now, we have matte, so we're going to, right here to track matte, we click down, and because it's run 1, we need run underscore A, so we go down to Luma matte, and here we go, we have already, you can see this kind of 3D movement. So drop the plate there, and I will move this one in between the layers so it is going in between through these trees, and you can see that here. And we can, of course, be more fancy with the position. We can enable the position key here. Move this one maybe a little bit this way. Let's go to the end and move it all the way here. So you're kind of following the motion. It doesn't matter, you can do whatever you want. And we'll just also enable motion blur for this one. You also, if you want, you can enable motion blur for this. Also, if you can, in the front one, you can add filters, you can apply the motion blur, you can apply fuzz blur, whatever you decide you can apply to this. You know, I think we're going to go to the color correction here. Let's change this one. Actually, we'll make it a little bit darker. Even more darker. So it's just something dark and mysterious going through the trees. And you know what? Maybe we can apply some blur, not like motion blur that we've been talking about, but just blur it out a little bit. You can barely see that mysterious something there in the trees. And you can go view some more tutorials for After Effects to see how you can do a lot of other things in this software, but for us right now we just need it for this. And here you see how this is now going through our trees. And this was put together very fast. There's a lot more that goes into good animation. You can also apply matte choke here to remove a little bit of white around them, but this is all up to how you decide to do it. Also, one suggestion, you may want to darken the background when you put it in. But we'll take this one for now, and let's create right now. We'll render it and see what we have in our final project. We'll add it to the render queue. Okay, let's preview what we have, okay? And here's our final rendered animation. Again, We didn't apply any motion blur to save time or any other special effects, but this gives you an idea of how you can place an object between layers by rendering and have this kind of motion. So thank you for watching this Geekatplay studio tutorial. And this was about how to create layers and how to render different layers for your animation project. And if you have any more questions or want to view more tutorials, please visit us at www.geekatplay.com or www.vututorials.com.